Diana walked into the high-end fashion boutique, her heart heavy but her face carrying a tired smile. She had been working here for months, but every day felt like a battle. Her manager, Susan, treated her more like a servant than a sales assistant. Whenever Diana made a sale, Susan found a way to take her commission, leaving her with nothing. On most days, Diana was sent to run errands instead of actually selling. She picked up dry cleaning, fetched coffee, and even cleaned the stockroom while the other workers attended to wealthy customers. "You should be grateful," Susan would sneer. "You don't belong here anyway." The senior staff weren't any better. They stole her clients, laughed at her simple clothes, and gave her the hardest tasks. But Diana never complained. She needed this job. One afternoon, as Diana carefully folded some expensive dresses, the glass door swung open. An old man walked in. His clothes were worn out, his shoes had holes, and his hair was messy. The other workers wrinkled their noses in disgust. "Sir, you can't be here," one of them sneered. "This is a luxury store." The old man smiled, showing yellowed teeth. "I just want to look around," he said softly. Susan walked over, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She looked him up and down, then snorted. "We don't serve people like you," she said. "This is a boutique for high-class clients, not beggars." The other workers laughed cruelly. Diana's heart ached. She knew what it felt like to be looked down on. She quickly walked over and gently touched the old man's arm. "Sir, would you like some water?" she asked kindly. The old man's eyes lit up. "That would be nice." Diana ignored the stares and whispers of her colleagues as she brought him a cold glass of water. She helped him sit down and smiled. "Take your time, sir," she said warmly. "Let me know if you need help." The old man touched her hand gently. His skin was rough, full of wrinkles. He looked at her like she was the first kind person he had met in a long time. "Good things happen to good people," he whispered. "Remember that, my dear." Diana didn't know why, but his words touched her heart. Mr. Benson finished his water and smiled at Diana, his wrinkled hands resting on the table. "You are a kind girl," he said warmly. "Help me pick out 10 luxury outfits." Diana blinked in surprise. 10? "Yes," he nodded. "I want the best. The finest suits, silk shirts, and designer shoes." Diana's heart raced with excitement. This could be her biggest sale ever. Maybe Susan would finally see her worth. Maybe today was her lucky day. She quickly began selecting the most elegant suits, carefully choosing pieces that matched Mr. Benson's frame. She adjusted collars, picked silk ties, and even found shoes that would complement his new look. The other workers stood at a distance, whispering amongst themselves. "That girl is such a fool," one of them snickered. "He's clearly broke," another laughed. Susan folded her arms and watched with an amused smirk. "Let's see how this turns out," she murmured. After nearly an hour, Diana laid out the final selection. "Sir, I think these will look great on you," she said cheerfully. Mr. Benson clapped his hands together. "I'll take them all." Diana beamed with joy. "That will be $25,000, sir," she said excitedly. The room fell silent. The other employees raised their eyebrows. Susan smirked. Mr. Benson patted his pockets, then chuckled softly. "Oh dear," he sighed. "I don't have any money on me." Diana's smile froze. The boutique erupted into laughter. "Are you kidding me?" one of the senior staff shrieked. "You wasted all that time on a poor old beggar?" Susan's eyes gleamed with amusement. She slowly walked toward Diana, her expensive perfume filling the air. "You really are stupid, aren't you?" Susan sneered. "You actually thought this old fool could afford those clothes?" Diana turned to Mr. Benson. "Sir, you don't have any money?" Mr. Benson sighed. "I do, but it's with my grandson. He's very rich. I just need to find him." Susan burst into laughter. "His grandson? Oh, how convenient." She turned to the other workers. "You hear that, ladies? This homeless old man is looking for his rich grandson." The staff howled with laughter, their voices filled with mockery. Diana felt her face burn with embarrassment, but she refused to look away from Mr. Benson's sad eyes. Instead of yelling or arguing, she simply smiled softly. "It's okay, sir," she said gently. "Don't worry about it." The laughter stopped. Susan narrowed her eyes. "Excuse me? Are you really going to stand here and act like a fool?" Diana ignored her. "Here, sir," she said softly, pressing the money into his hands. "At least take this for a taxi home." Mr. Benson stared at her in shock. His hands trembled as he took the money. "You are a rare soul," he whispered. Susan scoffed and took a step closer, her voice sharp and cold. "I warned you, Diana," she said. "I told you not to bring filth into this boutique, but you didn't listen. Lux Group has a class to maintain. This store is a part of the most exclusive fashion empire, and we cannot bring down our standards by associating with street people." She shook her head in disgust. "You are ruining our image, Diana. And for that, you're fired. Get out of my store." Diana took a deep breath, blinking back tears. She picked up her bag, turned on her heels, and walked out of the store without another word. She didn't know why, but something felt different. As she disappeared down the street, Mr. Benson stood there, watching her leave with a knowing smile. She had no idea her life was about to change forever. As Diana walked out of the boutique, her heart heavy, Mr. Benson turned to Susan, his face calm but firm. "You should not judge people based on their appearance," he said softly. "Kindness is more valuable than expensive clothes." Susan rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, spare me the lecture, old man." She crossed her arms and smirked. "Do you know where you are? Lux Group is a billion-dollar fashion empire. This boutique serves only the elite. People like you do not belong here." Mr. Benson shook his head. "Wealth is not just about money, young lady. It is about the heart." Susan's face darkened with anger. "That's it. Security." Two security guards rushed forward. "Get this poor old man out of my store," Susan ordered. "He has no right to stand here and lecture me." The guards grabbed Mr. Benson's arms, but he simply chuckled. "There is no need for force, my dear. I am leaving." With one last glance at Susan, he walked out of the boutique, stepping into the bright afternoon sun. Susan smirked in victory, while the other staff laughed. Little did she know, she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Mr. Benson halted a taxi and got inside, giving the driver his address. As the car moved through the busy city streets, he looked out of the window, his mind filled with thoughts. He had seen true kindness today, and he had seen true cruelty. When the taxi pulled up in front of a massive estate, the driver's eyes widened in shock. "Sir, this is your house?" the driver stammered. Mr. Benson only smiled and handed him the fare. He stepped out and walked through the golden gates of his mansion. Inside, everything was luxurious. Marble floors, golden chandeliers, and walls decorated with famous paintings. At the center of the grand living room stood Leonard Benson, the powerful CEO of Lux Group. Handsome, sharp-eyed, and dressed in an expensive suit, he looked every bit the billionaire he was. "Grandfather," Leonard's deep voice filled the room as he rushed forward. "Where have you been? You were gone for hours." Mr. Benson smiled. "I was testing the world, my boy, and I met a very kind soul." Leonard frowned. "Testing the world?" Mr. Benson sighed and told him everything. How he had entered the boutique, how the staff had mocked him, and how Diana was the only one who treated him with kindness. When he finished, Leonard's expression turned cold. "They treated you like that?" His jaw clenched. "They threw you out of our store?" His grandfather nodded. Leonard's hands tightened into fists. "That boutique belongs to Lux Group. They work for me. How dare they throw out my grandfather?" Mr. Benson placed a hand on his grandson's arm, his voice calm. "The girl, she was different. She was kind. She must be rewarded." Leonard turned to his assistant, a sharp-dressed man named Richard. "Get me the security footage from the boutique," he ordered. Minutes later, Leonard sat in his private office, watching the footage on a large screen. He saw everything. Diana ignored the insults, still treating him with respect. Diana taking out her own money and giving it to him. Leonard leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. "Find her," he said at last. "Richard," his assistant hesitated. "Sir? Find this woman. I want to know everything about her," Leonard repeated, his voice firm. "I want to see her." Richard nodded and hurried out. Leonard sat alone in his office, watching the screen once more. A kind and innocent girl. Who was she? Diana walked slowly down the street, her feet aching, her heart heavy. She was jobless, with no idea where her next meal would come from. She had given her last money to Mr. Benson, and now she had nothing. The afternoon sun burned her skin as she clutched her bag tightly. She took a deep breath, trying not to cry. Then, suddenly, a black luxury car rolled to a smooth stop beside her. Diana froze. The car was sleek, polished, and more expensive than anything she had ever seen up close. The tinted window rolled down, and a man in a sharp suit leaned out. "Miss Diana?" he asked, his voice professional and firm. Diana's heart pounded. "Yes?" The man smiled politely. "My name is Richard. I am the personal assistant to Mr. Leonard Benson, CEO of Lux Group." Diana's breath caught in her throat. "Lux Group?" Richard continued. "My employer would like to meet you. Please come with me." Diana stared in shock. This had to be a scam. Why would the CEO of a billion-dollar company want to see her? She took a step back. I think you have the wrong person." Richard shook his head. "No, we don't. Mr. Benson has sent me personally to bring you to his estate. You will be perfectly safe." Diana hesitated, her mind racing. This was crazy. It made no sense. And yet, something inside her whispered, "Go." She swallowed hard, then finally nodded. "Okay." Richard opened the car door, and Diana slid into the softest leather seat she had ever felt. As the car pulled away, she nervously clutched her bag, staring out the window. This was the biggest risk of her life. The moment the car passed through the golden gates, Diana's eyes widened in shock. The mansion before her was massive, the kind of place she had only seen in movies. The driveway stretched endlessly, leading to a grand estate with towering marble pillars and glowing chandeliers. As the car stopped, uniformed staff rushed forward to open the door for her. Diana stepped out, feeling like she had entered another world. "Please, this way," Richard said, guiding her toward the grand entrance. Everything was polished, extravagant, perfect. And then, she saw him. At the top of the marble staircase, standing tall and elegant, was Leonard Benson. Diana froze in place. She had only ever seen his face in magazines and business articles. But in real life, he was even more sophisticated, more powerful looking, more breathtakingly handsome than she had imagined. Everyone in the city knew that name. Leonard Benson, the youngest billionaire, the most successful CEO, the man every woman dreamed of marrying. Diana suddenly remembered Susan's words at work. "If I ever meet Leonard Benson," Susan had once said, "I'll make sure he falls in love with me. He's the perfect man, rich, powerful, and handsome." And now, he was standing right in front of her. Diana felt like she was in a dream. Leonard's gaze was sharp, but his lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "Miss Diana," he said smoothly, "I'm Leonard Benson." Diana forced herself to breathe. I'm Diana," she said nervously. Leonard's smile widened just slightly, as if he found her reaction amusing. Then suddenly, there she is. Diana turned quickly, and her eyes lit up. Mr. Benson stood at the bottom of the stairs, his face glowing with happiness. "Diana, my dear," he said warmly, "thank you for coming." Diana smiled in relief. You live here?" The old man chuckled deeply. "Oh yes, my dear. I'm not as poor as I seemed, am I?" Diana felt her knees go weak. This wealthy, powerful family, and she had unknowingly helped its grandfather. She suddenly felt so small in this grand place. Mr. Benson turned to Leonard and said firmly, "This is the kind of woman you should marry." Diana gasped. She laughed shyly, waving her hands. "Oh no, that's not..." But when she looked at Leonard, she froze. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't smirking. He was just staring at her. A long, silent stare. And for some reason, it made Diana's heart race. Diana sat in the grand living room of the Benson mansion, feeling completely out of place. The soft glow of the chandelier, the expensive velvet couch beneath her, and the quiet hum of servants moving about, it all felt unreal. Across from her, Leonard Benson sat with his usual unreadable expression. "I ran a background check on you," he said calmly. Diana's heart skipped a beat. "What?" Leonard leaned back in his chair. "I wanted to know more about the girl who gave my grandfather her last money, and I found out something interesting." Diana swallowed hard. "What? What did you find out?" Leonard's gaze softened just slightly. "You live alone, no family, no one to support you." His voice wasn't mocking or pitying, just a statement of fact. Diana looked down, gripping her dress. He was right. She had been on her own for a long time, but hearing it said aloud hurt. Leonard sighed and gestured to Richard, his assistant. "Bring them in," he said. Within moments, servants entered the room carrying multiple boxes, large, elegant, wrapped in gold ribbons. Diana's eyes widened. "What? What is this?" "A thank you gift," Leonard said simply, "for helping my grandfather." One servant opened a box, revealing designer clothes, silk dresses, and custom-made shoes. Another opened a second box. It was a luxury handbag worth more than Diana's yearly salary. And then Richard stepped forward, holding a small black box. Diana's breath caught as he flipped it open. Inside was a set of car keys. "A Rolls-Royce," Leonard said. "It's yours." Diana's jaw dropped. "What? No, I can't accept this." Leonard raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" Diana shook her head firmly. "I didn't help Mr. Benson because I wanted anything in return. I did it because it was the right thing to do." Leonard stared at her as if trying to understand her. "You're refusing a Rolls-Royce?" he asked, as if no one had ever done that before. Diana nodded. "Yes." Leonard was silent for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, he smiled. A small, genuine smile. "You're different," he murmured. Mr. Benson, who had been quietly watching, suddenly clapped his hands. "Then if you won't accept the gifts," he said, his voice warm, "at least stay with us for a while." Diana's head snapped up. "Stay here?" "Yes," the old man nodded eagerly. "I enjoy your company. I want you to stay in the mansion for a little while. Keep me company, child." Diana hesitated. The idea of living in this grand place felt overwhelming. But the old man's eyes pleaded with kindness. And in the end, she couldn't say no. Days later, Diana had barely adjusted to life in the mansion when trouble arrived. A sleek red convertible sped through the gates, the engine roaring. The second it stopped, a woman in designer heels stepped out, her lips pursed in irritation. Lucy. Diana didn't know her, but the moment Lucy's icy gaze landed on her, she knew exactly what was coming. Lucy stormed into the mansion, her heels clicking loudly against the marble floor. "Leo!" she called out, her voice filled with fake sweetness. Leonard walked in, adjusting the cuff of his designer suit. His expression remained cool. "Lucy." Lucy's sharp eyes flickered toward Diana, and instantly her face twisted into disgust. "And who is this?" she asked, her voice dripping with venom. Before Diana could speak, Mr. Benson smiled cheerfully. "This is Diana, my dear guest." Lucy laughed coldly. "Guest? In this mansion? Are you serious?" She turned back to Leonard. "Leo, who is she really? A maid? Some social climber trying to get close to you?" Diana's hands clenched, but before she could defend herself, Leonard spoke first. "She is none of those things," he said, his voice firm. "She is our guest and you will show her respect." Lucy froze, her lips parting in shock. Diana stared at Leonard in surprise. Lucy quickly composed herself, flipping her hair. "Respect? Leo, open your eyes. She is poor. She doesn't belong here." Leonard's jaw tightened. "And yet, she is here." Lucy crossed her arms, a fake smile on her lips. "Let me guess. She's pretending to be innocent while planning to steal your money."
Diana finally spoke. "I am not here for anyone's money." Lucy scoffed. "Oh, please, I've seen women like you before. You act humble, but the moment a rich man notices you, suddenly you're in love." Diana's face burned, but before she could reply, Leonard stepped forward. His expression was dangerous now.
"That's enough, Lucy." Lucy blinked. "What?" I said, "That's enough." His voice was calm but cold. "Diana is Grandpa's guest. You will not insult her again." Lucy's mouth opened and closed, completely shocked. She had expected Leonard to agree with her. She had expected him to throw Diana out. But instead, he was defending her. And she knew one thing for sure. This girl was a threat. Lucy had always known that Leonard wasn't in love with her, but she didn't care. As long as he gave her money to maintain her luxury lifestyle, she was fine with it. The designer bags, the first-class vacations, the expensive jewelry, that was all that mattered. And now some low-life girl was ruining everything. Lucy wasn't about to sit still and watch her perfect arrangement slip away. No, she would get rid of Diana, one way or another. She angrily stormed out of the house. Meanwhile, in the quiet of his private room, Mr. Benson sat comfortably in his large armchair, sipping tea. Across from him stood Leonard, his arms crossed, his "Grandfather, why did you call me here?" Mr. Benson set his cup down and looked his grandson in the eye. "That girl, Lucy," he said firmly. "She's not the one for you." Leonard sighed. "You've said this before, and I'll say it again." Mr. Benson cut him off. "If you marry a woman like her, you'll regret it for life." Leonard exhaled, rubbing his temple. "Grandfather, I have no plans to marry Lucy or anyone else for that matter." Mr. Benson nodded approvingly. "Good, because a woman like that only loves money, and the day things are no longer smooth sailing, she will leave you." Leonard said nothing, but his mind was full of thoughts about Diana. The next morning, Diana found Mr. Benson and Leonard in the breakfast lounge. She cleared her throat softly. Grandpa Benson, Mr. Leonard, there is something I've been meaning to tell you." Both men looked at her. I need to find a job," she said hesitantly. "I've been here for days, and I can't just stay for free. I need to earn my own money." Leo raised an eyebrow. "A job?" Diana nodded. "Yes. I can't take advantage of your kindness. I want to work and be independent." Leo leaned back in his chair, thinking for a moment. "I actually need a secretary," he said casually. Diana's eyes widened. "What?" Leonard folded his arms. "You're looking for a job?" "I'm looking for a secretary." "Seems like the perfect solution." Diana gasped. "Work at Lux Group head office?" Leonard nodded. "The position has been open for weeks. I need someone who is hardworking and trustworthy." He paused before adding, "You fit that description." Diana stared at him, overwhelmed. This job, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It would pay more than she had ever earned before. With her first salary, she would become more independent and move back to her apartment. But working at Lux Group headquarters, as Leonard's secretary, that was too much. I don't know," Diana murmured. Mr. Benson, who had been listening quietly, suddenly grinned. "My dear," he said gently, "you should take this chance." Diana bit her lip. "But—" "No buts," Mr. Benson said firmly. "You deserve something good in life. You helped me when you didn't even know who I was. Let us help you now." Leonard watched her closely. "So, what will it be?" Diana hesitated, then took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "I'll do it." Mr. Benson's eyes twinkled with happiness. He had a secret plan. This job would bring Diana closer to Leonard. And maybe, just maybe, it would change both of their lives forever. The following morning, Diana stepped into the grand Lux Group headquarters, dressed in a simple but elegant outfit. She held her bag tightly, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. The lobby was huge, filled with marble floors and glass walls. Employees in expensive suits walked briskly, carrying files and speaking in crisp tones. She had never worked in a place like this before. As she reached the reception desk, A woman in a tight black dress gave her a cold stare. "You must be Diana," she said, eyeing her from head to toe. "Yes," Diana replied politely. The woman's lips curled in amusement. "So you're the one who got the secretary position?" Diana nodded slowly. Another employee, a woman in a red suit, whispered loudly to her colleague, "I heard she slept with the HR manager to get the job." Diana's heart sank. Another woman snickered. "Or maybe she's a secret mistress." More whispers and laughter filled the room. Diana felt her cheeks burn. She wanted to scream, "That's not true." But she held her head high and said nothing. Let them talk. She was here to work. She would prove them all wrong. Lucy, on the other hand, was furious. It was bad enough that Diana was living in the Benson mansion, but now she had joined Lux's group, and not just anywhere. She was working directly under Leonard. Lucy had spent years trying to tie herself to Leonard, making sure no other woman got close. She had built an image that she was his future wife, the only woman who truly belonged beside him. And then came Diana, ruining everything. Lucy stormed through the office, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor, her face twisted with anger. She needed to get rid of Diana, fast. Lucy wasted no time. As a senior manager in the company, she had power, and she knew exactly how to use it. By the end of the day, rumors were everywhere. "She's only close to Leonard for his money. She must have seduced him to get this job. She's a gold-digging social climber." The whispers that had once been behind Diana's back now became open insults. When she walked into the break room, everyone went silent. Then someone laughed mockingly. "Look who it is," one of the employees smirked. "How does it feel to climb your way to the top by sleeping with the boss?" Another worker chuckled. "Maybe I should try getting close to the CEO too. Who knew it was this easy?" Diana felt her chest tighten. She wanted to scream that none of it was true, but she knew it wouldn't matter.
They had already judged her. And it was all because of Lucy. The gossip reached Leonard's ears by lunchtime. And when he found out who started it, his patience snapped. At a company-wide meeting that afternoon, Leonard Benson walked into the boardroom, his presence immediately demanding attention. Everyone went silent. Lucy sat at the head of the table, smug, thinking Leonard had finally realized Diana was a problem. Instead, his piercing gaze landed directly on her. "Lucy," he said coldly. She flipped her hair, putting on a sweet smile. "Yes, darling?" Leonard's jaw tightened. "Diana saved my grandfather's life without asking for anything in return," he said, his voice loud and clear. "She is more of a human being than you will ever be." The room fell into dead silence. Lucy's smile vanished instantly. Diana's heart skipped a beat. Leonard wasn't done. He turned to the rest of the room. "If I hear one more word about Diana that isn't work-related, I'll personally fire the person responsible." Murmurs spread through the employees. Lucy's face burned with humiliation. She had never been spoken to like this before. Leonard Benson had humiliated her in front of everyone. At that moment, Diana felt something stir in her heart. She had never had anyone stand up for her like that before. She looked at Leonard, her eyes softening. Maybe he wasn't as cold as she thought. Lucy marched straight into Leonard's office, slamming the door behind her. "How dare you embarrass me like that?" she shrieked. Leonard barely looked up from his desk. "You should watch your tone, Lucy. Watch my Leonard. People have always seen me as your future wife. Do you know what this does to my image?" Leonard finally looked at her, his expression icy cold. "You should have thought about that before you started a campaign of lies against someone who did nothing to you," he said sharply. Lucy's lips trembled. "You're choosing her over me?" Leonard sighed, rubbing his temple. "Lucy, you know we were never together." Lucy froze. "We have never dated," Leonard continued. "I never asked you to be my girlfriend. I never gave you a reason to think we were more than acquaintances." Lucy staggered back as if she had been slapped. "So stop being possessive, Lucy," Leonard said, his voice firm. "I have never belonged to you." Lucy's hands shook. She had spent years in his shadow,
building an image of a relationship that never existed, thinking since he hadn't opposed the rumors before, it would probably become true one day. And now, with just a few words, he had shattered it completely. Without another word, she stormed out of the office, her face red with anger. As days passed, Leonard and Diana worked closely together. At first it was just business. Diana worked hard, ignoring the stares and whispers. But then, something changed. Leonard found himself watching her more than he should. He found himself waiting for her smile. He found himself making excuses just to talk to her. And one evening, as they were working late in his office, he finally said it. "Diana," he said suddenly, leaning against his desk. She looked up from her laptop. "Yes?" He hesitated for a second, just a second, then said, "Go out with me." Diana's fingers froze over the keyboard. Her heart stopped for a moment. She blinked rapidly, thinking she had misheard. "Wait. What?" Leonard chuckled. "I said go out with me." Diana's breath caught in her throat. Leonard Benson, the man she had seen in magazines, the man every woman in the city dreamed of, was asking her out. She stared at him. Are you serious?" Leonard smirked. "I don't joke about things like this." Diana's hands clenched into fists. I don't know if I can. This is too much. You're Leonard Benson. I'm just what?" Leonard interrupted. "Just a girl who helped my grandfather when no one else did. Just a girl who refused money because she wanted to earn her own way." Diana's heart pounded in her chest. "But what about Lucy?" she asked. Leonard reached for her hand, his touch warm and steady. "Lucy is the daughter of my late father's friend," he said softly. "Our relationship isn't what you think." Diana searched his eyes, looking for any sign of dishonesty, but she found none. And slowly, hesitantly, she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll go out with you." Leonard smiled. And at that moment, everything changed. When Grandpa Benson found out that Leonard and Diana were dating, he was overjoyed. "This is wonderful news," he declared, clapping his hands together. "Finally, my grandson has opened his eyes to see what is right before him." He adored Diana. From the moment she had selflessly helped him in the boutique, he had known she was special. But the rest of the world? They weren't as kind. Within days, celebrity gossip sites exploded with headlines. Leonard Benson, billionaire CEO caught between two women. Is Leonard a playboy? CEO, allegedly dating his senior manager, his secretary. Lucy Williams, Leonard's longtime companion, loses her spot to a nobody. The media frenzy painted Leonard as a cheating playboy, and the rumors spread like wildfire. Lucy used this as an opportunity. She went to every reporter she could, pretending to be the heartbroken woman Leonard had betrayed. "Oh, Leonard and I have been together for years," she lied in an interview. "I never thought he would replace me with a..." She stopped dramatically. Well, you know, everyone understood her hidden insult. She was calling Diana a nobody, a gold digger, and Lucy's plan almost worked. Until Mr. Benson was not a man to be played with. The day after Lucy's interview, he called a press conference in front of the Benson estate. Cameras flashed, reporters crowded in, the world watched live. And Mr. Benson cleared his throat, his voice firm and strong. "I am here to set the record straight," he said. "My grandson Leonard Benson is not dating two women." Murmurs spread through the crowd. "I want the world to know that Lucy has never been in a relationship with my grandson. She is nothing more than a family friend," Mr. Benson said coldly. Lucy, watching from her penthouse, screamed in frustration. But Mr. Benson wasn't done. "My grandson has only one woman in his life," he continued, "and I want everyone to know that I only have one daughter-in-law." He smiled warmly and gestured toward the side. Diana, standing nervously in a simple but elegant dress, was brought forward. "I want my grandson to marry Diana," Mr. Benson declared. "She is the kind of woman Leonard needs in his life." The crowd went wild. Lucy's jaw dropped. Diana gasped. "Wait, what?" The flashes of cameras blinded her. Reporters yelled questions. Leonard turned toward her, studying her reaction. He hadn't proposed yet, but he had thought about it, and hearing his grandfather say it out loud made him realize something. He wanted to marry her. Lucy, watching from her penthouse, gritted her teeth in rage. Diana wasn't just taking Leonard from her. She was taking everything she had built. And there was only one person left who could stop this. Lucy picked up her phone and dialed quickly. The voice on the other end answered sharply. "Lucy, how are you?" Lucy forced herself to sound calm. "Lady Margaret," she said sweetly. "I thought you should know. A gold digger is after your son." There was a pause. Then Lady Margaret, Leonard's powerful aristocratic mother, spoke coldly. "Explain." Lucy smirked. "Her name is Diana. She's a nobody, a social climber. She tricked Grandpa Benson into thinking she's innocent, and now he wants her to marry Leonard." There was silence. Then, Lady Margaret's voice came through, cold and sharp. "I'll be on the next flight home." Lucy smiled. Diana had no idea what was coming for her. Leonard was in his office when his phone buzzed.
Mother calling. He sighed, rubbing his head before picking up. Mother. Leonard Benson. He immediately knew something was wrong. "I assume you've heard the news," he said calmly. "Yes, and I expect you to fix this immediately," Lady Margaret said firmly. Leonard's jaw tightened. "There's nothing to fix." "Oh, really?" His mother's voice was filled with disapproval. "I just arrived back home and the first thing I see is the media parading some random girl as your future wife. This is unacceptable." Leonard's patience was wearing thin. "Diana is not some random girl," he said. "I love her mom." Lucy, who had been eavesdropping nearby, smirked. She pushed open the office door dramatically and stepped inside. "Leonard," she purred. "You know what the easiest solution is?" Leonard turned to her, his expression icy. Lucy flashed him a sweet smile. "Just break up with Diana," she said simply. "Problem solved." Leonard's face darkened. "Lucy," he said slowly, "get out of my office." Lucy's smile faltered. "I was just trying to help." "Get out." Lucy's face turned red, but she had no choice but to leave. As soon as the door shut behind her, Lady Margaret's voice came through the phone again. "Leonard," she said coolly, "I'm coming over to your place tonight. We will discuss this in person, and I expect you to make the right decision." The call ended abruptly. Leonard set his phone down, his jaw clenched. That night, Diana sat alone in the mansion's garden, staring at the bright stars above. Her mind was heavy with thoughts. She was falling in love with Leonard. She could feel it. But now, his mother was back, and from what she had heard, Lady Margaret was not an easy woman to impress. Leonard walked toward her, his presence calming. "You've been quiet," he said softly. Diana sighed. I don't want to come between you and your mother." Leonard tilted her chin up gently, making her look into his eyes. "You're not," he assured her. "But what if she never accepts me?" Diana whispered. Leonard didn't hesitate. "Then that's her loss." Diana's heart pounded. He cupped her face, his eyes filled with warmth. "Diana," he said softly, "I don't care what the world thinks. I don't care about the media or Lucy or even my mother's opinions." Her breath caught. "You are the only one I want," he said. Diana felt tears prick her eyes. She had spent her whole life alone. No one had ever stood up for her like this. Later that night, Leonard stood in his office, arms crossed, his expression serious as Lady Margaret Benson stormed in. His mother was a woman of grace and power, always dressed in elegant designer outfits, her presence commanding. But today, her carefully controlled composure was cracking. "Leonard," she said sharply, closing the door behind her. "What on earth do you think you're doing?" Leonard sighed. He had been expecting this. "I assume this is about Diana." Lady Margaret narrowed her eyes. "You assume correctly. This girl, this nobody, has tricked you. She sees your wealth and power and is using you to climb the social ladder." Leonard's jaw tightened. "Diana is not using me," he said firmly. "She didn't even want to accept my gifts.
She hasn't demanded anything from me since I met her. She works hard, and his mother scoffed. Works hard? Please. The only thing she's working hard on is securing a ring on her finger. Leonard's eyes darkened. Mother, you don't know Diana. And if you refuse to give her a chance, that's on you. But I am not leaving her. Lady Margaret clenched her fists, rage flashing in her eyes. I am your mother, Leonard. I know what's best for you. Leonard took a deep breath, his voice calm but unwavering. And I am a grown man, Mother. I make my own decisions. Lady Margaret stared at him, her lips pressed into a thin line. You'll regret this, she said icily before walking out of the office. Leonard exhaled, running a hand through his hair. His mother was wrong about Diana, but he had no idea that someone else was planning something much worse. Lucy was losing her mind. Leonard had never officially been hers, but in her head, he belonged to her. And now that he had chosen Diana, she had one last move left. She needed to destroy Diana completely. Late that evening, when no one was watching, she slipped into the Benson family's private jewelry room. Inside, expensive diamonds, necklaces, and rings sparkled under the dim lights. Lucy carefully picked one of the most valuable pieces, a diamond-studded necklace worth millions, and slid it into a small bag. Then, with a smirk, she walked straight toward Diana's bedroom. The next morning, Diana was getting ready for work when suddenly, the mansion doors burst open. Guards stormed in, and behind them stood Lady Margaret, Lucy, and several members of the Benson family. Diana's heart pounded. What's going on? A guard stepped forward. Miss Diana, we need you to come with us. Why? Diana asked, confused. Lucy stepped forward, her eyes full of fake tears. I didn't want to believe it, she sniffled. But we found a missing necklace. In your room. Diana froze. What? She gasped. Lucy dramatically covered her mouth. I was so shocked when the maids found it. I thought you were a good person, but now I see you were only after the Benson wealth. Diana staggered back, her vision blurring with panic. No, I didn't take anything, she cried. The Benson family whispered among themselves. Lady Margaret crossed her arms. I knew it, she said coldly. A thief. Diana felt her heart breaking. And then, enough. Everyone turned as Mr. Benson stepped forward. His expression was calm, but deadly serious. Diana is not a thief, he said firmly. I know this girl. She has too much integrity for something like this. We are missing something. Lucy's face stiffened in panic, but she quickly forced out a sob. Mr. Benson, I know you care for her, but the evidence means nothing, he snapped. We will investigate this thoroughly. Lady Margaret frowned but said nothing. Diana's eyes burned with tears. She had done nothing wrong, but no matter how much Mr. Benson defended her, the whispers of the family, the guards, the staff, they all looked at her like she was guilty. It was too much. With one last glance at Leonard, she turned away, packed her things, and walked out of the mansion. Leo tried to stop her, but Grandpa Benson gestured for him to let her go. The following morning, Diana sat in her small apartment staring at the empty walls. She felt like she had lost everything. When she opened it, she stumbled back in shock. Lady Margaret stood there, perfectly dressed, her face unreadable. Diana's heart raced. Mrs. Benson. Lady Margaret stepped inside, looking around with mild disgust at the small space. Then she turned to Diana, her expression calm but cold. I came to make you an offer, she said. Diana swallowed. What offer? Lady Margaret pulled out a checkbook, clicked her pen, and wrote down a number. Then she ripped out the check and placed it on the table. Diana's breath caught in her throat. $5 million. If you leave Leonard forever, Lady Margaret said smoothly, this is yours. Diana's hands shook. She looked at the money, looked at Lady Margaret. Then, with tears in her eyes, she picked up the check and tore it in half. Lady Margaret stiffened in shock. I love your son, Diana whispered. But I will never take money to walk away. I am not a gold digger. For a moment, the room was silent. Then Lady Margaret smiled slightly. It wasn't a warm smile, but it was respectful. You're stronger than I thought, she murmured. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out. Diana sank to the floor, tears spilling down her face. Was this the end? Back at the mansion, Leonard had remained silent when Diana walked out of the mansion. He had watched her leave, his chest tightening, but he hadn't stopped her. Because he knew. Words wouldn't be enough. Diana had been wrongly accused, humiliated, and cast aside. And the only way to bring her back was to clear her name completely. So while the world thought he had done nothing, Leonard was already working. He reviewed every piece of security footage from that night. He spoke to the guards, the staff, the maids. And when he found what he was looking for, he knew exactly how to expose Lucy for good. That afternoon, Leonard stormed into the Benson estate, his presence commanding silence as he walked into the main hall. Lucy, dressed in an elegant gown, was already there, sipping tea like nothing had happened. She saw Leonard enter and smirked. "Leo," she purred, standing up. "I know you're hurting, but—" "Shut up, Lucy," Leonard cut her off coldly. The room fell silent. Lady Margaret, Mr. Benson, and the rest of the family were present, watching curiously. Lucy's smirk faltered. "What?" Leonard's eyes darkened with fury. "You framed Diana," he said sharply. "You stole the necklace. You planted it in her room." Lucy laughed nervously. "Leonard, that's ridiculous." Leonard raised a remote control and pressed play. A large screen lit up in the room. Security footage from the mansion played in front of everyone. There she was, Lucy, sneaking into the jewelry room. Lucy, taking the diamond necklace. Lucy slipping into Diana's room. Gasps filled the air. Lady Margaret's eyes widened in shock. Mr. Benson shook his head in disappointment. Lucy's face went pale. "No," she whispered, stumbling back. "This is a lie. It's fake." Leonard's lips curled into a cold smirk. "Is it—" A guard stepped forward. "Miss Lucy, you need to leave this estate immediately." Lucy panicked. "Leonard, please. I did it because I love you." Leonard's expression didn't change. "You love power, Lucy, and you chose to frame an innocent person for it." Lucy screamed in rage as the guards dragged her out of the mansion. Her dream of marrying Leonard, destroyed. Her reputation, ruined. Her last chance, gone. Lucy Williams had finally lost everything. After Lucy was thrown out, Lady Margaret sat silently for a long moment. Then she exhaled deeply. "I misjudged Diana," she admitted, turning to her father-in-law. "She never wanted money, she never wanted status. She just wanted Leonard." Mr. Benson smiled knowingly. "It's about time you realized that." Lady Margaret's lips twitched slightly. Then, for the first time, she nodded. "I think," she said quietly, "I'd like to speak with her again." Diana sat in her small apartment, staring at the ceiling. She had refused millions to leave Leonard, but she had already lost him. Or so she thought. A knock at the door made her sit up quickly. She opened it, only to find a personal driver in a luxury suit. "Miss Diana," he said with a polite bow, "Mr. Leonard Benson has requested your presence at a private lounge." Diana's heart skipped a beat. Leonard wanted to see her. She hesitated. Should she go? Then she remembered the way he had always defended her, the way he had always protected her. Taking a deep breath, she nodded. "Take me to him." The private lounge was unlike anything Diana had ever seen. Soft golden lights, a beautiful candlelit dinner, a breathtaking view of the city skyline. And standing in the center of it all, Leonard Benson. Diana froze, her breath catching. He looked at her with a soft smile, one she had never seen before. "Diana," he said gently, walking toward her. "I've been waiting for you." Diana swallowed hard. "Leo, Before she could finish, Leonard did something that made her heart stop completely. He got down on one knee. Diana's eyes filled with tears. She covered her mouth as Leonard pulled out a beautiful diamond ring. "I don't care what the world says," Leonard said softly. "I don't care about the fake rumors. I only care about you." Diana's heart pounded. Leonard's voice was filled with emotion. "You are the strongest, kindest person I've ever met. Not only have you impacted my grandfather's life, you've changed mine." Diana's tears slipped down her cheeks. Leonard took a deep breath. "Diana," he said, "will you marry me?" Diana let out a shaky breath. Then, with a small, tearful smile, she whispered, "Yes." Leonard's eyes lit up as he slid the ring onto her finger. Then, in front of the beautiful city lights, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her like she was his entire world. Diana had lost everything before, but now she had found something greater. She had found love. The moment Diana and Leonard's engagement was announced, it spread like wildfire. Breaking: billionaire Leonard Benson engaged to ex-boutique assistant. The modern Cinderella story. Diana, a simple girl, wins the heart of the country's richest CEO. Who was Diana? Everything we know about the woman Leonard Benson chose. Social media exploded. Some people cheered for Diana, praising her kindness and humility. But no one was more shocked and bitter than Susan. She was fixing her makeup at the boutique when she saw the headline flash across her phone screen. She froze, staring at the words. Diana, engaged to Leonard Benson? The same Diana she had humiliated and fired. Susan's hand trembled, the lipstick falling from her grip. "No," she whispered. "That's impossible." Her mind raced. How had this happened? How had the girl she looked down on, the girl she had mocked and bullied, ended up winning everything? Before she could process it, the doors of the boutique swung open. Leonard and Diana walked in. The boutique fell silent as the staff stared in shock at the couple standing before them. Leonard, tall and powerful, held Diana's hand, his presence commanding respect. Susan's throat went dry. Diana was dressed elegantly, her engagement ring glittering under the lights. The same girl Susan had once treated like a nobody. Now she was the future Mrs. Benson. Susan forced a smile, her voice overly sweet. "Mr. Benson, Miss Diana, what an unexpected surprise." Leonard's eyes narrowed coldly. "I came here for one reason, Susan," he said, his voice sharp as a blade. Susan swallowed hard. "Oh, of course, sir. Anything." Leonard crossed his arms. "You insulted my grandfather. You looked down on people because of their appearance. You bullied an employee who did nothing wrong." Susan's face paled. Leonard's voice hardened. "I would have fired you a long time ago, but I wanted to tell you myself." Susan's heart dropped. "You're fired," Leonard said coldly. "And let this be a warning. Discrimination and bullying will never be tolerated in my company." Gasps filled the store. Susan staggered back, her vision blurring. This was it. She had lost everything. As she watched Diana and Leonard walk away, Susan finally remembered Mr. Benson's words. Kindness is more valuable than expensive clothes. For the first time, she realized she had ruined herself with her own arrogance, and there was no one to blame but herself. While Diana and Leonard continued planning their wedding, another storm was brewing. Lucy, now desperate and full of rage, was not done yet. Though she had been disgraced and thrown out, she still had one last weapon, her position at Lux Group. Using her managerial access, she hacked into the company's financial records. She leaked confidential reports, exposing sensitive business deals and investor contracts to the press. Her goal? To destroy Lux Group. If she couldn't have Leonard, she would ruin him instead. The scandal hit the media instantly. Lux Group in crisis. Major financial data leaked. Is Leonard Benson's empire about to fall? Who is behind the biggest corporate breach of the year? Lucy smiled, watching the chaos unfold. But her victory was short-lived, because Leonard was already tracking her down. Lucy was celebrating in her apartment when she heard a loud knock at the door. Her heart pounded. She slowly opened it and froze. Leonard stood there, his face icy. Behind him, 2 police officers. Lucy's smile vanished. "Leonard," she stammered. "What are you—" Leonard tilted his head, his voice cold. "You thought I wouldn't find out?" Lucy stepped back, panic creeping in. I don't know what you're talking about." Leonard held up his phone, showing evidence of the hack, traced directly to Lucy's account. "Game over," he said. The officers stepped forward, placing handcuffs around Lucy's wrists. She screamed, "No! You can't do this to me! I love you!" Leonard's expression did not change. "You don't know what love is, Lucy," he said simply. As the officers dragged her away, Lucy's world crumbled completely. She had lost. For good. The day after Lucy's arrest, Lady Margaret sat quietly in the Benson mansion, reflecting on everything. Diana had been humiliated, framed, and tested, but she had never broken. She had refused money. She had walked away with dignity. And most importantly, she had never once tried to change Leonard. Lady Margaret finally realized Diana was exactly the kind of woman her son needed. That evening, she called Diana into the sitting room. Diana sat nervously, waiting for another confrontation. Instead, Lady Margaret looked at her with calm eyes. "I misjudged you," she said softly. Diana blinked in shock. "My son is truly lucky to have you," Lady Margaret admitted, "and I hope that one day you will allow me to be part of your life as well." Diana's eyes filled with tears. For the first time, Lady Margaret had accepted her. She stood up and hesitantly wrapped her arms around Leonard's mother. Lady Margaret stiffened at first. Then, slowly, she hugged Diana back. Leonard, watching from the doorway, smiled to himself. Diana had won over everyone. And now, nothing stood in the way of their happily ever after. The day of Diana and Leonard's wedding arrived, and it was nothing short of legendary. It was the biggest event in the country, drawing in royalty, billionaires, dignitaries, and the world's most elite celebrities. Cameras flashed as luxury cars and limousines arrived at the grand cathedral where the ceremony was set to take place. The floral arrangements alone cost millions. The chandeliers glittered like diamonds and the guests were treated like royalty. But nothing compared to the woman at the center of it all. Diana. Dressed in a custom-made couture gown, she stepped out of the luxurious bridal car, her gown flowing like a river of stars encrusted with pearls and diamonds. A tiara rested on her head, one specially designed for her, a symbol that she was no longer just a simple girl from nowhere. She was now Diana Benson, the future queen of high society. As she walked down the aisle, everyone rose to their feet, gasping in admiration. The same people who had once mocked her, the same colleagues who had whispered behind her back, were now cheering for her. And at the end of the aisle, Leonard Benson stood waiting. His eyes were locked on her, his heart pounding. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. And today, she would become his forever. As the ceremony neared its final moments, Mr. Benson stepped forward. The entire hall went silent. In his hands, he held a small antique box. "Diana, my dear," he said warmly, looking at her with pride. "From the first day I met you, I knew you were special. You showed kindness when no one else did. And today, you are not just marrying my grandson. You are becoming part of our family." He opened the box. Inside was a rare, priceless heirloom, a golden brooch encrusted with sapphires passed down for generations in the Benson family. "This," Mr. Benson continued, "belongs to the woman who will carry our family's legacy. And today, I give it to you." Diana's eyes filled with tears as he pinned it to her gown. "Welcome to the family, my child," he said. The guests erupted into applause, but the most important gift was yet to come. As the reception began, Leonard took Diana's hand and led her to the center of the ballroom. "I have something for you," he murmured, his voice soft but firm. He reached into a velvet box. and lifted the most stunning diamond necklace anyone had ever seen. Gasps filled the room. It was called the Ocean Front. A masterpiece of rare blue diamonds, the necklace was valued at $30 million, a piece of jewelry fit for a queen. Diana's breath caught in her throat. "Leonard, this is too much," she whispered. But Leonard gently placed the necklace around her neck, his fingers brushing her skin as he fastened it in place. He then looked into her eyes, his voice deep with raw emotion. "You are the only woman I will ever love," he said, his voice steady. "And my love for you is as deep as the ocean." Diana's heart pounded. A tear slipped from her eye, and Leonard gently wiped it away. "You changed my life," he continued. "You gave me something money never could, a reason to love." Diana threw her arms around him, whispering, "I love you too." And then Leonard kissed her. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a promise, a declaration, a new beginning. The entire room erupted in applause, fireworks bursting outside, the world celebrating their love. Among the crowd, Diana's former co-workers stood watching in absolute shock. Susan, the senior staff, everyone who had once looked down on her. Now they cheered for her. The nobody they had mocked was now the most powerful woman in high society. And at the edge of the ballroom, watching it all unfold, stood Mr. Benson. He smiled, his heart full of pride and satisfaction. Diana had proven her worth, and now she would be forever loved. As the music played and Diana and Leonard shared another kiss beneath the glowing chandeliers, Mr. Benson chuckled softly to himself. "Good things happen to good people," he whispered. And Diana Benson would have a love story for the ages.